Okay, so in this video we're going to be talking about noses. And noses aren't quite as complex, maybe, as eyes and mouths, but they're still important, and you should still know how to make them. So, the first thing we're going to be talking about, obviously, is shapes. The basic building blocks of a nose. And there are two basic shapes that you need to know to make noses, and those are triangles and rectangles. And more specifically, kind of like long, skinny rectangles. And you'll see how we break that down in a second. So we're going to go ahead and just get started with kind of the basic shape breakdown. So an easy way to do a nose is just to start with a kind of tall triangle and then just make a really squatty triangle that kind of comes out of the bottom of the first one. And I've kind of divided it in half to kind of show you the middle of the nose and that they both come to a point, and you can see I'm adding a little bit of shadow to it just to give you, I guess, the illusion of 3 dimensions. But another way that you can draw noses, and I guess kind of the way that I think more about it, includes rectangles. And so you want to start with that kind of tall, skinny rectangle, and that'll be kind of like the base, like the middle of the nose. And then from there, you want to kind of draw a line near the bottom, a horizontal line, and then just connect those shapes with, I guess, triangles, really. And that makes the bottom of the nose. And then you just connect again at the top, make more triangles, and that kind of creates the sides of the nose. And it's really pretty simple. And you want to bear in mind that that rectangle, at least the top portion of that rectangle, is there's a reason for it. It's acting as kind of the ridge, the center ridge of that nose. And it's important to, I guess, understand or realize that that ridge is there, because that'll help you in your anatomical creation of that nose. And so now what we're going to do, I'm going to make this bigger and then drop the opacity, and we're going to use this as the base for just going in and fleshing out all of the details of that nose and then giving you kind of the anatomy. So I'm going in and I'm just starting with that kind of point down near the bottom on the sides. And that is those sides, those edges are called wings. And from there, going to, again, that portion of the rectangle, it's kind of like the start of where you can create the nostrils. And those, you can kind of just think of them as like almondy kind of shapes that are diagonal from that portion of the rectangle. I'm just going in, fleshing out the top of that nose as well, and that portion of the nose then becomes the rest of the face, or the area with the eyebrows and the eyes, and that kind of angle area is called the bridge of the nose. That's an important thing to know. The bottom, where both of the nostrils kind of come together, is called the septum. Like if you've ever heard of a septum piercing or anything, that's what they're talking about. And of course, like I said before, the alus, or the wings of the nose. And that's just kind of like the casing for the nostrils where, you smell. And so now I'm going to go in and I'm going to show you just a side view of a nose. And it's pretty simple. It's just going in and using those triangles again. because you're not going to see those rectangles really from the side view, because the rectangle makes up that ridge, right? So just gonna go ahead and flesh that out. It's not too much really to flesh out, just a little bit. Of course, you got to remember the bridge of the nose and that angle where the bridge happens. Then above that bridge, it angles back up, and then that becomes the brow ridge, right? So just go back in, label things for you. Not too complex, really. And of course, there's going to be a little bit of variation from person to person. And so now, I'm going to show you kind of the breakdown of materials on your nose, right? What each of those parts is made of. And this blue portion that you're seeing first is bone. That's what's kind of going on underneath everything, right? If you touch the top portion of the ridge of your nose, it's harder. It's because it's made out of bone. Then the majority of those side portions are just kind of made out of flesh and skin. And that middle ridge is made out of cartilage, and that's why it's a little bit more flexible, but still a little bit hard. So now we're going to go over some other angles, how you can draw noses. And these are, these first two are a little lesser seen, but still important to understand. So the first one we're going to talk about is looking at a nose from below, right? And as you can see, it's kind of a similar shape to the nose kind of basic shapes that we've done already. It's kind of just a trapezoidal shape. And you can see I've filled in the nostrils there. The shape kind of follows the contour of those wings, so they're not quite just like slits. They kind of taper in at the point of the nose a little bit. And the next one we're going to do is the angle from above. And this is not really as common. Very, very uncommonly will you look just straight down at a person. But still fairly simple, and I just added that line at the top there to indicate the brow ridge, where the bridge of the nose has gone in and then come back out, and at that spot you hit the brow ridge. And so one detail that I forgot to mention before about the below angle is that, like we talked about in the mouth video, mouths curve around the face of the shape, and so it's not just going to be a flat line under it. There's going to be kind of a curve to it because you're starting to reach that mouth area. And so now we're going to talk about the 3/4 view. And so with this, you just need to, using triangles is a little bit simpler with the 3/4 view. And after enough practice, you'll pick it up enough that you maybe won't even need these basic shapes. But using triangles is pretty easy to get a 3/4 view, and you just need to remember foreshortening and the fact that half of the nose is going to look smaller because it's going into the distance, if only a little bit. So you can see I'm just kind of filling in the details of that basic schematic that I've already put together, and there's really not a whole lot to add. You just need to figure out the angle of those triangles, and that's just going to come with practice. I can't give you like a catch-all for that. And so you can see I gave you a little bit of a indication of angles as well. So now we're going to talk about the subtle differences between males and females when it comes to how their noses look. So I'm just going to sketch in a nose from the side pretty quickly. Just kind of the same thing as we've been doing. And one thing that you can notice here that sets it apart is that there are angles. So the bridge of the nose has a pretty distinct angle. The tip of the nose has a pretty distinct angle. And so if you want to express that a character is male, stick to angles, stick to kind of straighter lines in general, with a little bit of wiggle room, I guess. And so females usually are going to have softer features. And so as you can see, the angles that I've made on the bridge of the nose and the tip of the nose, the point of the nose, are less severe. They're less sharp. So if you want to make a character look female, in general and with noses as well, softer angles will generally give you the correct idea. So now, that brings us to the final portion of the video, and that is painting. And so, we're going to start off with a little sketch, just the same way that we've been doing before. Get this rectangle and triangle kind of shape language going. And just very simply, then put in the details from there. Just make sure everything looks pretty correct before we go into the painting. And you can see I put in the bridge of the nose as well. It's important to indicate that. And you'll see how we'll do that in a painting. Because these lines aren't going to really exist that distinctly in a painting. So, just putting in the base coat, like the skin tone. I'm going to go ahead and make that a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. And of course, like we've done before, I'm going to put in the light source. Very important to figure out where your light source is. So I'm just doing it from the left and the front. Basically, a 45-degree angle and a little bit above to the left. So I'm just kind of filling in some areas of shadow that are gonna not catch the light, right? Because noses aren't just flat on your face, they poke out. So a good portion of that nose is going to be in shadow based on where our light's coming from. So you'll see the middle portion, I just want to make sure that's distinct. That ridge, that cartilage portion is distinct from the shadow portion because they are definitely not the same plane. And I'm also going in and adding a slightly different value to the other side where the nose kind of recedes back into the face on the other side, because that's not going to be exactly the same kind of plane as the ridge, and it's not as severe, right? You don't want to overstate that fact, but you do want to make it known that those angles are different. And I'm going in and adding a little bit more shadow for those areas that are a little bit more occluded because there's more of a crease, right? And in the nostrils, they're just going straight into your head, so light is not going to be able to hit there as much. But those wings, they are a crease in the flesh, in the skin, and so, like we've talked about before, there's going to be occlusion. So they're going to be darker. I'm just going ahead and adding a cast shadow coming out from the bottom of the nose, because that portion, that bottom of the nose, is protruding, and so the light is not going to be able to hit below it and a little bit to the side of it, right? And the final step that we're going to do for this nose are highlights. And that is because your nose is usually a pretty oily surface. And so there's going to be much more of a difference between the highlights and the shadows. There's going to be more specularity, as we've talked about before with eyes, right? Specular reflections, specular highlights. There's going to be more specularity on a nose because of that oil. And so you can see I've just added in kind of on the edge of that ridge, I've added in a highlight, and down at the bottom as well. And that's just based on where the light would be hitting. So that pretty much does it for noses. Not that bad, right? Anyway, thanks for watching.